Hello and welcome to the Matriarchy. Today, Lisa and I are going to do another What's on Our Mind, because there's a lot on our minds. Right, Lisa?
Well, I couldn't sleep last night, so that might sort of
Oh,
say
boy.
it, yes.
I think the last time we had one of these was just before the holidays, and so much has happened since then. I mean,
I know. So much. I honestly probably can't even remember all the big major events that have happened since the holidays. I can't even hold them all in my brain. There's so many of them. But I have
yeah.
enough.
Well, it was enough to not be able to sleep last night.
That's right.
And I think that's the we were just joking before we got on that we're always talking about like our mental health and these things, but yeah, we need to talk about our mental health because I think that is part of the strategy, honestly, is just the constant overwhelm, like
Yeah.
bad news after bad news, and just dropping like figurative and literal bombs
Yeah.
all the
Oh,
time.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. And I do think back to the idea of talking about it, I think that, studies have shown and we know that talking it out with your friends, especially your female friends, if you're female, it does help our mental health. I think, just the act of
Yeah.
talking it out and venting, so to speak, I think is good for mental health. So we're going to do that today.
Yeah, I feel some venting coming on.
We got some venting in
we
us,
got some
yeah.
venting. And when Trump won this past election, I told myself I wasn't going to do what I did in the first term, which is just sit in this overwhelm and just react to every crisis.
Yeah.
Have I done that? Like maybe a little bit. I'm not going to say there wasn't quite a bit of doom scrolling and whatever, but I'm a little better at catching myself when I'm just reacting and spiraling. It's not to say that doesn't happen, but I wanted to do something. Like doing something really helps keep like this constant anxiety at bay.
Yeah. Agreed.
So here we are.
Which is why I do too much, probably. I probably overcommit, but it is a strategy. It is a strategy to, keep some of it over there and not have to take it in all the time. And hopefully I'm doing some things that maybe will help something along the way. So
you're definitely doing that, but
yeah.
I get the sense that you've always taken on too much, Lisa.
Well, you
might.
I
don't
too.
want to talk.
I mean, you have 4 kids and are doing all these things. There's a lot to take in right now, and it is very difficult. And I do think that a lot of the information that is presented to us in so many different spaces, that's the other thing. It's like, it's hard to even operate in the workspace or, any space without getting this information, right? And then there's the idea of clickbait. And I think that for so many of us, it's just hard to comprehend where we're at right now on so many subjects. And I'm going to throw out the one and we'll get it over with. But the Epstein files, I think, is one of the biggest thing that consumes the minds of many, many women. I don't know if it's consuming the minds of many, many men. I have friends.
I think it is. I think it is.
Well, I have a lot of friends who are disappointed that their husbands aren't reacting more strongly. And it could be just the difference of lived experience, right? Like, I think for many women, we can very easily empathize with the women and girls who were affected because many of us have been in those situations or we know somebody who's been in that situation. But the fact that this is, like, going on in the background with everything else that's happening. The one thing I keep reminding myself, though, is, like, that already happened, right? Like, we're just at the reckoning right now. Like, that
Mm.
all that horrific things that they did, which I don't think we even really have a grasp on exactly what was done and who did it, but that already happened, and we were oblivious to it when it was happening, or at least I was. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't know that there was like a trafficking ring going on. I mean, in the 2000s, I didn't know that, right? I was just busy living my life. And so now here it is. This is all coming out, and it's just so much to take in.
Yeah. I do remember hearing about trafficking, but, I was in the throes of raising my kids and trying to keep them safe. Like, they wanted to go to the mall, right?
Sure, but did you know about Epstein and, like, this big
No,
thing? No, that's what I'm saying, like,
no.
we didn't
But I
know there
also
was,
think that
like,
this
coordinated.
kind of thing has been
Yeah,
going on forever.
to this coordinate. Well, okay, probably, maybe. I mean, we've got the church has been implicated, but my point is that all of this information we're receiving right now,
Mhm.
like, that is of stuff that has already happened. And now we're reckoning with it. Is it still happening? Possibly.
But maybe
But
not on this scale and this coordinated effort, is that what you're saying?
well, I think shining the light on it as it is now, I think makes it harder to keep it going at that level here. I mean, I don't know what else is happening across the globe, though. I mean, I think there's always a problem with that. But I think seeing the prince get arrested, and I know is more financial crimes related, but related to this. But that is the next point of all this is why aren't we more horrified and why aren't we demanding as women, as women, why are we not demanding more justice
We
to a
need to see
level.
some perp walks.
Yeah.
Well, and I was struck by how this is playing out in other countries.
Mhm.
The fact that former Prince Andrew was arrested on his birthday, no less. Um, it just I'm like, okay, so the rest of the world is actually reckoning with the fallout from this. And I just think in this administration, like, it's not going to happen with the players that we have right now in charge. Like, I just don't see that happening.
Well, why not? And why don't we demand more? I guess that's my question. And
Maybe
we
it's
talk.
how. How do you demand
Well,
more?
that's my question.
Why
And
is easy because these are the same people who are doing it are in charge, right? Like,
so I think it talks to a wider problem, which is about how women are treated in our country and across the globe, and how women
mm,
are thought of. And I'm absolutely convinced at this point that it's going to be up to the women to demand better.
mm.
Men are I just in a whole, men are not going to do it. They're not gonna suddenly say, "Yeah, I think I'll risk my career and, like, stick my neck out for the women." They're just not gonna do that. So I do think it's gonna have to be women-generated, change, and my question is, will it continue to be this slow, like, chugging change that we've been having over the last decades that now we're seeing, powerful people trying to pull us back on? Or do we need to do something more? And do I know what that more is? No, I don't. But it's a space that I would like to know more about. I think that, we talk about a matriarchy. Um, and I think that yeah, I think we need to go that way. So what does that look like? I don't have those answers, but hey, if you're out there, if you got some answers for us, got some ideas, I think it's time for women to organize and
Well, I think,
mass. Yeah. Yeah.
and I see it starting to happen. I I think when the Me Too movement came out, that was a bit of a seismic shift that a lot of women just started talking about this. And, there were perp walks. Um, and then there's been a lot of um pushback to that as well. What I saw is that a lot more women started to speak up about their own lived experiences to the point where, you know, people that I knew were like, oh, yeah, that totally happened to me. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, I've known you really well my entire life and just never talked about.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree. It was a very pivotal moment. It's disappointing that it just sort of flittered away. And I understand that
Do
there's
you think it
just
did? Do you think it? I mean, there's more talk in the national consciousness. I don't know that it's changed a lot of representation. But I don't know. Maybe has there been change? Has
we
there been no
elected Trump
change?
again. Oh, okay, so I don't think it had the
Okay.
effect that we would want it to. We elected the a guy who's been found to have raped somebody in a court. I mean, a federal court found that, that and we know the misogyny that comes out of Trump and his administration, and yet, women voted for him. Um and so
Yeah.
I don't feel like we've moved as far as we could have in that time frame. Um, again, I don't know what it's going to take, but I know a lot of women are really done right now after what's coming out with the Epstein files. Um, what's coming out with just everything from the U.S. men's hockey team to, we are, to your point, we are more seeing, like, paying attention to how are reporters talking to female athletes? How are, we are looking at it more, critically and having those conversations more. So I do agree with you that that probably is an offshoot of the Me Too movement, but we need to go faster. We need to move
Yeah.
faster. We have daughters, right? What kind of world
We
do we
have
want them to
daughters.
live in,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
With the Epstein files, it's so blatant, right?
yeah,
No
that's bad.
there's not a lot of gray area here. These were
No,
underage girls. Like, there's no such thing as an underage woman. These are
right.
underage girls. And I think what kills me is that why are we treating men differently than we're treating women? Women get to be underage women, but a 29-year-old
Man,
man,
it's a man.
you
That's a
know enough
man.
not to be a
That's a
dick,
man. The
like
brain is
that's a
fully
full-grown
developed.
man. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a man.
You have responsibility and should be held accountable. And I think what you're getting to is like, why don't we have accountability for what's being done
Yeah,
to girls?
yeah.
And you can extrapolate a little bit more like to children. Like after um after Sandy Hook,
Hmm.
I was like, well, that's it. Uh, if there's no appetite to go after gun control reform when beautiful 6-year-olds were the
Yeah.
victims, there's never going to be. And to even further than that, um, a Black friend of mine said that if it doesn't affect them that their little white babies are being killed, nothing will.
Yeah.
And so it has to be a different kind of change. You can't just go on appealing to people's sense of right and wrong.
Correct.
You have to start disrupting the systems that are keeping that in place.
Yes, I agree. Yes. But to your point, we currently, our federal government's run by people who have no appetite to do so. well, they're disrupting all sorts of systems, but
That's true.
to their advantage,
But who are they
basically.
protecting, right?
Right.
They're protecting the
Yeah.
aggressors.
Yeah. And I think we could talk about systems. I think it's important, and that's a very complicated policy. But in the end, it is people who are in the systems and who determine how the
Yeah.
systems operate. And we have not, clearly, to your point, we have not won over the minds of the majority of people in this country. Not to the point where they're willing to, again, um, I think the economy overrides everything else in a lot of people's minds, and for good reason. They're surviving. They have
Yeah.
to put food on the table. They have to pay their rent, and obviously that is a basic need, and that is often how they vote is that way. So I'm not saying that everybody likes what's happening, but they will always vote for the economy, and unfortunately, the economy gets weaponized then, right?
Yes. Yeah.
To support these people who want the systems to be a certain way.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
so I'm going to jump off just a little bit
Yeah.
here. So Lisa and I were talking yesterday. Is it okay if I say it was your birthday and we celebrate your
Sure.
birthday?
And I'm going to say Kath took me out to lunch. It was so
We had
fun.
such a nice lunch. But when we were talking over lunch, Lisa's birthday lunch, we started talking about how there is a common denominator for most conservatives and liberal. Like, most people think we need to get the money out of politics.
True.
And we
True.
started talking about Citizens United and kind of wondering how much people remember that happened. Basically, what was it, Lisa? I forget what year. 20.
It was before the 2016 election. I think between like 2010 and 2016. But it was a pivotal Supreme Court case that decided that corporations could spend money on elections. And because corporations are basically the same as people and they should have free speech. So even though states like Michigan have some strong campaign finance laws and the statewide in terms of who could be spending, there are so many loopholes to get around that. And these corporations can spend money on elections, and they do. So,
I just looked it up. It was 2010, the Obama years, right? This has been going on for a while. But it's gotten worse and worse and worse. Like, I remember seeing recently like a chart of how much money was being spent by billionaires on elections, and it like doubled. Like, Elon Musk, like, he really did buy this last presidency.
yeah,
It's gross. It's
it is
gross
gross.
that a handful, I mean, more than a handful, but like less than 1% of the population has so much power,
Yeah.
and we're letting them
It's
have that
that
power.
is what makes us not be a democracy anymore, right?
Yeah.
Because we have so much monetary influence. And I know whenever I've said this to people, and I could so I'm going to just say, forgive me, audience, before I say this, because I know the reaction when I say this, but I truly believe that campaigns should be financed with the people's money. And there should be, a lot of like guardrails around that. And I think that I know people are like, I don't want my taxpayer money going to those politicians. That's not that's not what I'm saying. But your taxpayer money would go towards how they would promote their campaigns, and it would be even out the level, the playing field, so that they're can only message like they're messaging on who they are, right? And they can't have all this extra money coming in, because if you look at a typical campaign, I mean, you have to spend so much money on TV, on digital ads, on mailers. I mean, a basic mailer at whatever it is, like 70 cents a piece, and you're mailing, just even if it's to a city, a small city, each
Yeah.
mailer is tens of thousands of dollars, right? Like, so I don't think people like think of campaigns that way. But that's where the money is used, I've heard it explained, and I like this analogy. It's how big of a megaphone you have to get your message out.
Mhm.
And I absolutely 100% believe that all candidates should have an equal amount of money to do that. And
I
other countries have done this where they use it's
No,
so
I
like,
hear what you're
yeah,
saying. I haven't
you know,
studied,
yeah.
how that would like, what that would look like. I will say, like, just one small thing is you can see this play out in local school board races that have gotten so contentious lately. It used to be you raise, I don't know, a couple $1,000 and, get some flyers and get some yard
And now
signs and call it a
now
day.
it's
Now it's
25 grand.
That's so much for someone who's never held public office before. Like, who's paying that?
And who's not gonna get paid when they get into office? Like, it's a
Yeah,
very, and then, I it takes a special sort of person who's willing to sacrifice their time,
yeah.
do all of this to be in that role, when it's just so difficult. So yes, and I hear the argument all the time that people say, I don't want my taxpayer money going to the politicians. And I just would argue back, it does anyways. Because, when you're not getting a politician that actually represents the people as opposed to corporations or some other
Yeah.
special interest, you are paying for that anyways in other ways in policy and legislation,
I
in
just,
your tax base. So that's my little 2 cents. I'm sure
well, but
somebody's going
how
to
do you,
argue with me,
oh,
but
I
it's
look
there.
forward to the comments. Please comment.
And if you have a really good reason why you think that could never work in the United States of America, I'm interested in hearing. But I understand it's a major paradigm shift. And it certainly, if you're somebody with a lot of money who likes to be able to have that advantage, you're not going to like that. But I do think it would better our situation in the country.
Well,
Yeah.
how do you put that genie back in the bottle?
Mm, right.
We've seen this play out so much more. So if this started in 2010, imagine 16 years later, how much, like, the wealth inequality has grown and grown and grown.
It benefits the wealthy because, like, for instance, if you or I wanted to donate money, just you and I, or just as a person, we have limits. There's limits,
Yeah.
to like give directly to a candidate. So, but people who are wealthy and who have more influence, more capabilities of opening these super PACs, they are in a position to operate differently. It is kind of complicated, but I do think, and I think I'm really glad you brought this up because I've often thought how important it would be to have, even if it was just virtual classes for people, and I wouldn't be able to teach. I'm not an expert enough to be able to teach it, but to bring somebody in who is an expert on it, to teach the average person how campaign finance operates, I think a lot of
Hmm.
people would be really surprised, um, what that world looks like. I mean, sometimes we hear about these super PACs and sometimes they have a bad name on them. Sometimes they have a good name on them. But in the end, if they decide to attack or promote a specific candidate, there's not a lot of guardrails around that. Even in
Mm.
telling the truth, to be honest, like untruths or half truths, they can do that. And I think, yeah, it's a big part of why we're here. There's other legislation that happened over the last 40 years, I think, of why we're here. But I think the Citizens United case was pivotal. So
Yeah, I think corporations and and maybe really it's kind of digging back because the wealthy have too much power and too much influence.
yeah,
And if they're the ones who get people elected or they are elected themselves, like, the system keeps perpetuating like that until you're at a stage where we are now, which is like the greatest wealth inequality since just before the Great Depression, or even worse than that. I mean, the top 1% control the bulk of the economy. I
yeah,
mean, like, the vast majority of the economy. And kind of to your point earlier, when we're just on this systems overload, this is by design. So, like right now, we might see it as scandal after scandal that's happening, but our lives, for the average worker, this is by design. This is not an accident that we are overloaded just to we are overloaded just to put food on the table. You
Yep.
know, when a full-time job doesn't allow you to support your family, send your kids to college. When you do have a full-time job and your employer is saying, hey, we're going to give you just a few hours less so we don't have to give you health benefits. And
Right.
they teach you how to apply for food stamps. Like, what's going on?
It's gone the pendulum has swung way too far towards, corporations and the
Yeah.
wealthy. It unfortunately, there's a lot of people, just average people, who, for one reason or another, sort of buy into that that's a good thing. The whole trickle down, that, but we've seen that that's not real. The trickle down economics isn't. It's not
More like a
trickling down.
sponge. I think it's more of a sponge situation.
It's not trickling, or if it's trickling, it's like really trickling. Like drop. 2 years later, drop.
Well,
um, yeah,
if it were working, we would have a better situation for the bulk of Americans.
yeah.
Like if this
Uh,
system did work and you wouldn't see CEOs with that kind of pay disparity from their employees.
It's It's fascinating.
Well,
And,
that's
you
a
know,
word
it's the
for it.
old adage, as long as you can convince a person, I mean, in the adage, it's the man, so I'm just gonna leave that there. But I'll be nice and say person. As long as you can convince the person that they're better than somebody else, then you can just take their money right out of their pocket. I'm sure it's said better than that, but that's my summary.
Well, you just need to
So,
be convinced that you're doing better than your neighbor. Um, and
doing better than them, those people.
yeah. Um, and I think this kind of goes back to what we've been talking about, patriarchy and matriarchy, because this patriarchy is a system where it's better than or less than. It's the scarcity mindset.
Yeah. And everything's a pie, right? And there's only so many
Yeah.
pieces. Yeah.
But the truth is there's enough food on this earth to feed every single person. Like no one should be going hungry, let alone in the richest country in
Or be homeless.
or be homeless. Yeah,
There's no
we
reason.
really do. We have the resources, they're just being distributed so inequitably. And I do think that we actually are in a socialist country. I think it's just a corporate socialist country,
Yeah. Oh,
you
yeah, for
know,
sure. We subsidize
too big to fail.
corporations. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think
Uh,
it's one thing, like, I do think the free market, um, there's innovation and,
sure.
th there is a lot of value in that. And, like, this whole remember in the '80s, greed is good, right? But,
Mm,
in the '80s, we would say greed is good, and there was this
yeah.
whole, like, push to, like, deregulate everything.
Yeah.
Um, and look where we are. Like, there has to be a balance, right?
Yeah.
And you want your, um, I was having this conversation with someone who's very conservative, fiscally conservative. And, that, well, there's a lot of very wealthy people that are very generous. And this kind of conversation went on for a while. Like, I've sat with that a bit. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't think a wealthy billionaire we should one be depending on their generosity, and two that they should have the influence on how
Yeah.
all that money is spent. I think
Right.
that should be elected officials.
Right.
And I think that we would if we could separate the not just religion, church and state, but separation of business from our government. It's right now it's married. It's too tight.
Yeah.
And I do think it needs to be a yin and a yang. What we've set up for businesses is short-term gains
Mhm.
as a model.
Mhm.
And we've seen the ramifications play out.
Mhm.
And you can see it like even on an individual level, like CEOs, they can jump from one company to another and be paid well. Like the long-term benefits to our society are not encouraged. Like,
Mhm.
they're responsible to their shareholders
Mhm.
and they have to make money. But making money isn't always it doesn't look like investing in your employees. It looks
Mhm.
like a bigger check to your shareholders.
Right.
And so Lisa and I were just talking about um, Sam's Club versus Costco. I saw this video on TikTok or something. And there are different models of the way that they structure their pay. And not to go into it, but it really Costco was more of a matriarchy minded and Sam's Club was more of a patriarchy minded. And it was
I
you could
love
see it.
Costco.
I do love my Costco.
They've been standing strong through this administration and not folding to some of the demands of our dear
and
leader. Yeah.
and I think that in order to see these things play out like a matriarchy, you need the long-term time frame because we're talking about generations, not like accumulating wealth quickly. But you're laying these building blocks, right? You're raising children. Well, it takes forever to raise kids. You're talking about placing value on caretakers.
Yeah, for sure.
Because
Yep.
yeah, like, we put so much value on people that work and why aren't they working?
Yep.
Um, and we don't put any value
Work
on
in terms of a paid work.
paid
Because
work. Yeah.
caretaking is a lot of work.
Caretaking, yeah, yeah.
It's a lot of
And
work,
there's so
yeah.
much unpaid caretaking.
Mhm.
And if we could only put a dollar value on that, like you would see, a lot of because we talk a lot about the invisible labor too.
Yeah, no, I think getting back to the idea though of capitalism, free market, and yes, I do think that there is benefits to free market and not free market, but a well-regulated market. Let's put it that way. I don't think a free market works because I think
I don't
human
think it can
greed.
ever work.
Yeah, I think human greed, it's always going to intercede. So back to the idea of a well-regulated market. So capitalism, I know there's a lot of pushback against capitalism. And honestly, until I see a different plan that looks like it can work, I'm not really anti-capitalist personally. But I do a million% believe that we need more regulations to keep people safe and to not rob their money, right? And I think when regulations go out the window, then a lot of very smart people out there know how to use the systems to their advantage. And um, it's been very disappointing to me all the way around ever since the internet was invented, or not invented because it was invented a long time ago. But ever since it became, widely used, that we have just seen virtually hardly any regulation around how it's used, how the companies are collecting data. I just think there's been a real failure of our government, of our leadership for decades now in protecting people. And I think this
Yeah.
is also how we've gotten here, combined with this unlimited money being spent in elections and all sorts of spaces, right? And there's a part of me that admires how smart some of these people are. I
They know
think
how
they're
to work the
smarter than
system
me.
because they're
Yeah.
writing the system, they're creating the system,
Yeah,
they're
they're
creating
creating and
loopholes
yes, they're
mm,
creating loopholes, and I think what's happening
or
this
exploiting
past year,
them. Yeah.
exploiting them, all the things. And I think, okay, the Trump administration and the Heritage Foundation, which was behind him, like they wrote Project 2025. I mean, it was very clear what he was running on, even if he denied it. And I think a lot of people are surprised now that they actually are like enacting these 2025. Or they did quite a bit of it. But there was sort of a weird brilliance behind it, right?
Yeah.
Like how to tear down a democracy, like in all these different spaces, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
They're doing a pretty good job in a year.
they did a pretty good job, and now they have their new one to promote families. I even hear Democrats saying the Democratic Party doesn't talk about family values enough, right? And what they mean by that is they want a man and a woman married, a traditional wife, basically. And we've talked about that before, and there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with being a traditional wife. You know,
No.
you and I have both had periods of our life like that.
And I'm grateful that I had that choice. And
Exactly. It's
that
the choice.
is the
But
difference,
we
is
both
the
went to
choice.
college, and
Yeah.
then we made that choice. We both could have chosen to stay in our career. We both chose to stay home with our kids for a
Yeah.
while. And so I think that needs to continue happening. And women, although I got to tell you at this point, I tell my kids, don't leave your career. Like, even if you get married and have a kid, do not leave your career, because it is very hard as a woman to get back into a career after leaving for a while. And also, you lose your own credit score. There's so many things that kind of happen because our capitalistic society is not built for this, right?
Well, I think that's the thing, is that
Yeah.
we are not built to support families. What I would like to see, though, is not a reaction to 2025, but a vision for 2028 and beyond. Like a vision
Sure.
of how you can raise, your family, whatever your family looks like, how we can talk about maternal health and childcare and caregiving and like all the things. Like, let's talk about how all the things and how we can make that better for people's lives.
Sure. But I will say that just having the vision doesn't win, right? I would argue that we should focus on the economy, but that's me.
Well, it's easier to sell fear than it is hope.
Yeah.
But hope is more long lasting. Like, it's just, you know, it's a lot easier to tear something down than to build it. Um, and how do you build it? I've been thinking about this for a while. This idea that, patriarchy is, when we're talking about like better than, worse than, right? But if you always have that measuring stick, you're always going to be measuring against something, and you're always going to come up short, and you're going to find some way to get it right. But I feel like a true matriarchy, you put down the measuring stick, and if you feel equal, then you don't have to feel less than. And when you don't feel less than, then you don't need to feel better than. And then you can revel in someone else's success. The the analogy that kind of stuck with me is, in gardens, things bloom at different times. Not everything blooms at once, and some plants need shade, some need more water, some need more light, and whatever. But it works in harmony, and it's not like one's better than another. And I think that that's what we're trying to do and trying to say is like, let's stop comparing and start empowering people. And there's something special about my women friends, that were in these trenches, and especially like during the hardcore raising your kids years. I just treasure my women friends, and I don't feel in competition with them. The force, like, I even think about like the Hudson Bay girls and people saying, well, did you fight a lot?
Right. Right.
I've been listening to Amy Poehler's podcast a lot lately,
Mm.
and, she and Tina Fey went on tour, and people were like, well, are you fighting a lot? Did you fight? And it's like, did people ask that of Steve Martin and Martin Short? It was actually on that episode, like, of Martin Short. Like, they don't get that question. Like,
Right.
like, that's so stupid. Why do you assume that two women have to, like, but you're almost creating these conditions of competition because of scarcity, right? You go back to the old Hollywood days and they would
Mm.
pit like Betty Davis against Greta Garbo or whatever. Maybe I'm getting the two actresses mixed up with different ones, but like, because there weren't that many roles. And so you pit women against each other for these, and then it's like suddenly you turn 40 and there's not, you're over the hill, right? Or maybe even 30 back then. I don't know. But there's all these roles for men. There's all these positions of power for men. And you get, as soon as women are in a group, people are already looking for the fault lines.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to it's patriarchy where they decided that women should be subjugated, and the only way women could survive was to have a husband. And in order to have a husband, they were competing with other women to have a
Mm,
husband. I think it goes back to that. I think it's been tens of thousands of years of that. So it's sort of
yeah.
put into our DNA at this point, and I think it's absolutely the work that has to be done right now to, you've talked about this before, to unpack this and unpack how it affects how we think about each other, how we think about ourselves, how we think about men, competing for their attention. But I think that's we're seeing a change with young women. Like they're
Yeah.
saying, a lot of them are saying, I'm not going to compete with you, my friends. I'd rather be with my friends than the guy. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what I'm hearing from young women. Um, it's like, let the guy compete for me, you know?
Yeah, and that's the
Um,
change that I think that we're seeing, is that women do
yeah,
have more freedoms, more opportunities. You can
which is
have
what
your
they want to
own.
take away.
Right,
Which is what they
right,
wanna take away because
right.
it's
Because
harder
you
for
couldn't
them.
leave.
Yeah.
Yeah, you couldn't leave before.
You couldn't
You
leave.
couldn't have, you couldn't.
Survive. You couldn't eat.
Yeah,
You couldn't have a house over, to live in, right? And then for a woman, once you have that first baby, I mean, we know how connected we are to our babies, and now you're even more going to be subjugated because you wanna make sure your baby is also taken care of.
yeah.
Um, and so I think that has changed for women drastically, which is why I think they are, they're serious, obviously, about anti-abortion and also anti-birth control at some point. I mean, I know hopefully that hasn't gained enough popularity, but there is a movement amongst, certain people about that. So,
Well,
um,
anti-birth control that's just about control. That's
it's
about
total
controlling.
control.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
controlling
well, and so
women's.
is anti-abortion. That's control. It's all control. It's controlling women, 1,000,000%.
But we
Yeah.
don't give the same messaging to boys, you
No,
know?
boys can do whatever they want.
Yeah. They
Boys
can do
can do
whatever.
whatever they
Yeah.
want. They can feel whatever they want. They can say whatever they want. Oh, sure, there
Yeah.
could be sometimes somebody else, and more and more there are mothers and fathers who are starting to also unpack this and start looking at it, and grateful for that. But I think we're just at the really beginning of that.
But I think like what we're basically drilling down to is center your life around yourself, and not someone else. Or
Right.
and not centering it around a man. I think there's a difference too. It took me a while to learn this, Lisa, but this idea of codependency. I think our society conditions women in relationships in general. These are broad generalizations, but it's what I've experienced, is that women are expected to manage men's emotions. Women are the one who pull back or move forward. If if you're waiting to react depending on how someone else is, you
Right.
have to be secure in yourself and your partners to be secure in themselves, and then you do a dance together as opposed to intertwining yourself so that one's always reacting to the other. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Oh,
I don't know if I'm
totally.
explaining
No,
it well.
I totally know what you mean. Hopefully the
Because we've
audience.
both done therapy.
Yeah, and I think I think, like, going back to the overarching theme of matriarchy, I do agree with you of what your assessment earlier about the, matriarchy and scarcity versus, plenty and, how people feel about themselves over other people or not. I totally agree that that's an aspect of matriarchy. But I want to talk about an aspect of the opposite, which is patriarchy. And I do believe that patriarchy is based on male violence. And
Mm.
I do believe that male violence comes right into this subject, right? Why do women watch over men's emotions? And because if so often, if women say something that crashes on the man's ego, a violent reaction will happen. Not necessarily hitting, although that is something like actual violence, or very strong anger and yelling, throwing things, or sometimes men use the threat of harm to themselves. Like I had a boyfriend like that in high school who, when I would try to break up with him, he would threaten to kill himself. And so I do think that this is a big part of the patriarchy is men using violence. I think we're seeing it now in our nation at a macro level with ICE and immigration and Venezuela and all this other stuff. But I do think it plays out in interpersonal relationships every single day in many, many places. And I do think it's the personal work that we need to do. Every one of us, I think women and men need to do it to recognize those spaces and to have those conversations or remove themselves from spaces where that is a dominant factor. I think that's the patriarchy on the microcosmic, like like interpersonal patriarchy interactions. So, yeah,
Well, and to build out systems where you can, and I think this is where we're
yeah,
kind of changing a little bit, right? That you're women have more options.
true.
y-
Yeah.
but also there's so much victim blaming in like why didn't they leave, right?
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of things that need to change. But I do think that if you are in a position where you are privileged enough to be able to know that you will be okay and that you are in a space to challenge patriarchy in that way, I think I would like to encourage everyone to do that. I mean, it doesn't mean like you turning around and being the patriarchy violent person, you screaming or yelling, but just rejecting that template, so to
Well,
speak.
it's
Like,
interesting you
yeah.
said that because I think that can happen too.
Oh,
I think
sure.
and I think that is a result of, even when it's women abusing men in a relationship, which you don't hear about as much because
It doesn't happen
honestly,
as
like
much, but it does happen. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
proportionally, but it does
Yeah.
happen. But
Yeah.
I still think that's a patriarchy. I
Yes.
think that's a result of patriarchy,
Yes. Agree.
because there's like a dominance, there's a power position. I'm raising 3 sons and just kind of trying to guide, like, I think my brother's moved on that much more, and, I'm trying to guide my sons as best I can to be aware
Yeah.
of the world around them.
Yeah.
Um,
Which is great work.
and they
Good. That's great work.
well,
Important
it's
work.
yeah, I mean, it's like the boys will be boys, like, no.
No.
That's not it,
No.
like,
Yeah.
boys will be respectful, and I do think my boys are, but, there's only so much, um, I'm still learning about this, and so it's
We
kind of
all
like
are.
patriarchy is
Yeah.
we're fish in water, and patriarchy is the water. We don't even
Right. It's all
recognize
around
it
us.
sometimes.
Like, 100%. Like every day I learn something different where I'm like, oh, yeah, I didn't think of that one. Like that's affected and that could be different too. So I think though that these conversations, I'm a big, conversations is the way to do it and to have them and, um, to encourage our young folks, our kids, but also I mean, I think you and I both talk a lot with our kids' friends too. And just everywhere, that you can do some encouragement. And I am a believer in encouragement. I remember I was going to mention this too, because this came across my mind this morning. I used to teach Sunday school and we used to do virtues, right? And we had a motto to call them up, call them up to the virtue. Don't don't focus on what they did wrong, but call them up to the virtue. And I was like, I need to start doing that more again. Call myself up, call other people up.
I like that.
Yeah.
Because you don't learn as much from shame.
No.
That's a short-term patriarchal value.
Yes.
You encouragement, empowerment. That's, my mom used to say, you can't really, you can't force a kid to eat, sleep, or learn. You can provide the right conditions and you can inspire them. And when you look back on your favorite teachers, was it the ones that shamed you into submission? No. It's the one who believed in you,
Little secret, if you're shaming people, you're no one's favorite. Anywhere in your life. So I recommend not shaming people. Personally, I think you win more friends by being kind and helpful.
Well, another one of my mom's gems is it's easier to attract the bees with honey than vinegar.
100%. That's a good one.
Oh, I will say we're winding down this episode, but a few other things that are on my mind are, one is I'm going to the PTA Legislative Convention in DC, and so I want to talk more about that after I get back, and hopefully we'll have a couple of special guests.
Yep.
Yeah. And then the other thing is on April 8th, mark your calendars.
We are going to have a live stream of a live event with Nora Noose and a book talk of her new book, 24 Hours at the Capitol. So please check our website and our social media accounts, which are just about on all of them. And you can find more information about how you can either attend if you are local to us in Michigan, or you can watch live via Facebook, potentially even YouTube. So hold on, we might do that and check it out. And we'd love to have you be a part of it. And if you do have some questions for her ahead of time, please email them to us at communications@envisionthematriarchy.com.
Or you could also put them in our comments section, because we do read our comments, and then that drives up our algorithm.
That too. That's always good. Yes.
While you're at it, give us a little 5-star review
on Spotify, Apple Podcast, anywhere you find us. So
yeah,
and YouTube. Please subscribe on YouTube. We'd love to have you subscribe on YouTube.
If you're enjoying this episode, and hey, if you're still listening, thanks.
You're having a great time. Hopefully you are too.
Yeah, because we get some haters out there, which is fine. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. But if you actually are enjoying this, we really could use just hit the click the 5-star button so that the haters don't bring us down. Because we don't want haters bringing you down either.
I don't know if they're haters or just bots and trolls, but please, please be there for us. We need you.
We need you in our matriarchy. Thank you for listening to us vent. I hope it was a little cathartic for you too. I know we talked about a lot of things, but I think at the end of it, hold on to your hope. This too shall pass. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, take a break and then channel your outrage into something constructive, because honestly, you will feel better.
For sure.
Maybe share our episode. Sorry to bring it around.
Let's get the women together and demand better. I think we need to demand better for our kids. So,
yeah. That's what us moms do. That's really what we excel at the best. So let's continue to,
they're hurting our kids. Don't let them hurt our kids. That's
Right. Yeah. And we need to keep our joy. Like joy is resistance. Joy is resistance.
absolutely. Absolutely. So,
That
okay.
should be a t-shirt. Joy is resistance. So
Oh, I like that. Yeah. Okay. So, thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you again soon on the Matriarchy.
welcome to the matriarchy.
Welcome to our community.